So wonderful to see you, Ajahn.
Good evening.
Good evening. This is Deepthi Ajahn, and of course we have members, people from India that you met. We have Dr. Dhar, Rajinder ji, Anish ji. So I think we'll put them up on spotlight for a few minutes so that if you'd like to, I think they'd like to speak a little bit, catch up with you.
Sure.
Before we formally begin in a couple of minutes.
Good evening, Dr. Dhar, Rajinder.
So you are on mute, Dr. Dhar.
Good evening, Anish.
Good evening, Ajahn.
Good evening, sir.
Respect to you.
Thank you very much, Ajahn, for agreeing to be present. And welcome.
Is it cold there in Delhi?
Yes, not very cold, not as cold as in England, but cold. From our standards, cold.
Good to see you all. So thank you, Anish, for bringing everything together to create a cause for this Dhamma teaching today.
It is all jointly, Ajahn, Dipti and Dr. Dhar. We all, they are all instrumental in it.
Very good. Very good.
Ajahn, one small question. Whose picture is it behind you? The picture behind we can see?
That is the great master Shu Yun, who was the most eminent monk and Dharma teacher in China. And it was his meditation teachings were the first teachings that Luang Por Sumedho practiced when he was a layman.
Okay.
So this picture was given to me by Ajahn Jayasaro, who was given it by a disciple of Master Shu Yun. He passed away in 1959 at the age of 120.
Okay.
He made an adhitthana to be a monk for 100 years. He became a bhikshu when he was 20, and he passed away when he was 120.
Oh. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So he's one of the great masters of our age, and just happens to be on my wall. I have many different teachers on my wall. That just happens to be the one that's behind my opposite my camera. So many people ask that question.
Okay.
Is it related to the Master Huang in the City of 10,000 Buddhas?
Yeah, he was the teacher of Master Hua.
I see.
So, Ajahn, with your kind permission, may we start now?
Please, yes.
So, I would like to formally welcome you on behalf of Aranya Vihar Trust and all the people who've joined us today. Maybe first we start with the 3 bows to Ajahn. Let's do that. Bow. 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 Ajahn, so it was in May 2019 that you had conducted the last retreat for us in Dhammarama, New Delhi. And before that, actually in December 2017, you'd conducted the very first retreat when the center was not even instituted. Mm-hmm. You really initiated us into the forest tradition in that sense. It was the first time many of us ever came across a Ajahn from the Thai forest tradition. And the good report is that we stayed on. So that impression was really deep into our minds and hearts. And thereafter, many more people have joined the group. So if I may kindly introduce, say a few words about yourselves.
Please do, yes, please do.
Yep. So Ajahn was born in England in 1956. He completed his honours degree in psychology and physiology from the University of London. However, his true calling as a spiritual seeker took him to Thailand in 1978. And as miraculous as it sounds, he went to a monastery because he was looking for a place to stay. Really for a short time though. But that short stay was enough for him to get convinced to become a monk, and monastery became his permanent home. He was ordained as a bhikkhu by none other than Lumpur Cha himself in 1979. Thereafter, he continued his training under Lumpur Sumedo, helping him set up the Chithurst and Amravati monasteries in England. In 1996, Ajahn moved to California to establish a Bhagiri monastery, where he was the founder co-abbot for 14 years. He returned to Amravati in 2010 and has been the abbot of the large monastic community there, which comprises both monks and Shiladharas. It's really a hub of Dhamma activity, the monastery Amravati, and if it were not for the lockdown, there would have been so many retreats that would have taken place in the last couple of months. So I remember when Ajahn was here and how he was talking about that he's on 15 different committees. So there's a lot of work that's going behind the scenes that Ajahn has enabled for us. Among his many great qualities is his inclusive nature. We just heard that there is a photograph of a master from a different tradition right in his room. And in fact, Ajahn in that spirit has actually led retreats, even with a Zen Roshi and a Tibetan monk, and has mastery over Dzogchen as much as Theravada. Ajahn is a prolific writer. In case anyone didn't know that already, Ajahn, we were playing a presentation of your quotes. And actually, when we were looking for those quotes, I was astounded to see that there are 58 books under your name on the Amravati website, which of course includes some translated books as well. Ajahn is also a versatile speaker addressing a range of topics. And he has undertaken arduous pilgrimages to Mount Kailash, to the Arctic, and also an 830-mile journey on foot. That's a Tudong in England. My personal favorite is that Ajahn has lent his voice to reading Ajahn Chah's Dhamma talks. His fervor and voice modulation bring alive the stories for the listeners. And for his many, many contributions to the Sasana, he has been conferred royal titles in 2015 and 2019 from the King of Thailand. So there could be so much more that we could say. At this point, I'll invite Anishji to make a formal request for Dhamma Desna. Mr. Anish Goel is the trustee and the managing trustee of Aranya Vihar Trust. The topic for today's Desna is how to practice being aware of awareness. So with that, I invite Anishji.
Brahma Chalokadipati Sahampati Katanjali Anadhivaram Ayatchatta Santidha Satta Parajaka Jatika Desetu Dhammam Marukam Pimam Pajam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Well, I'm very glad to have this opportunity to see so many familiar faces in your little boxes on my screen. So some of you I know well, some of you I haven't seen before, but welcome to this session. I also realize people are in different places gathered around the world. And so that here in England, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I think in Delhi, it's 7:30 in the evening. So wherever you happen to be around the planet, I send my greetings and offer these reflections today in the spirit of our customary, our customary form, which is to say, please listen, and whatever is meaningful and useful, take it and keep it with you, and whatever is not useful, then please leave it aside. So this theme of how to practice being aware of awareness, this is the kind of area that Lumpur Sumedho, Ajahn Sumedho often addresses or is a reference point in his teachings. And so I've been a close student of his for many, many years, but I can't really speak completely for him. But I'll just offer my own reflections and understanding of this area and try to offer some, say, pointers towards practice that will help to make this an actuality. So when we take a phrase like this, being aware of awareness, just understanding or having an idea of what the phrase means is one thing. We can create a picture in our mind with the words and have a conceptual idea of what we mean by being aware of awareness. We have English, as an English word, apperception, which is not very commonly used, spelled A-P-P-E-R-C-E-P-T-I-O-N, like perception with AP on the front, apperception. And that means to know that you know, to be aware that you're aware. So there, in the English language, we have a word that refers to something akin to this quality. Also in the world of psychology, nowadays, there's a word, metta-attention, not metta as in metta, loving kindness, or maitri, but metta as in an extra layer, M-E-T-A, one with one T, metta-attention. So being aware that you are aware, knowing that you know, attending to the fact that you're paying attention. So metta-attention is another word that we have in English that refers to this area out of the psychological field. That hasn't made it into the Oxford English Dictionary yet, but I think it's one of those ones that will get included before too long. So it can be a bit of a confusing area if we try to approach it conceptually, but what I'd like to do today is also point out it's not just having a word, it's not just having a concept, but rather it's the most important thing is being able to embody that quality, to actualize that quality of being aware of awareness. So having the concept is one thing, like you have a word, like the word pen is not a pen. And what you're seeing on the screen is not a pen, that's an image of a pen. So that the actuality is this, what's I'm holding in my hand, but the perception and the word even is not the actuality. So it's important to see that when we any kind of Dhamma concept, to not just mistake the word or the idea for the actual quality itself. You can't write with the word pen. It's only a word, but this you can write with. Well, I can write with, you can't, because this one is here with me. So with respect to that, I feel it's important to get a sense of, this is about practicing and embodying a particular quality of knowing. And that's what this, the real value of a theme like this is in how much that can be realized, actualized, and embodied in our life, our Dhamma practice, because that's what's going to make a difference to our attitude, the way we see the world, and what we see as being our life and who and what we are. So this area also, it's one of those, if you get into philosophical speculation, you deal with it on a conceptual level, it can be very confusing. And when I was sent this theme, I think it was Deepti sent me this theme as a suggestion, or maybe it was Anish, I forget. Then it reminded me of this limerick that I heard many years ago. Actually, somebody wrote it on the card of for my 21st birthday, and it's a limerick written by a university student, and it goes, there was a young man who said, though it appears that I know, what I'd like to see is the eye that knows me when I know that I know that I know. And it can be kind of infinitely recursive. That kind of thinking can go on forever. So rather than just trying to, or ending up thinking ourselves into a tangle, I felt it'd be helpful to explore what do we mean by knowing and the different ways we can know, and in particular to speak about the quality of mindfulness, and that not just a cognition of an event or a perception, but say when we use the word knowing, often what we're meaning is there's a mindful attention, there's a conscious awareness of what's going on. So that in our tradition, Ajahn Chah used to represent the different kinds of knowing with the model of the hand and the arm and the body as ways of talking about the different kinds of mindfulness, or different aspects of mindfulness. So he said that ordinary sati, mindfulness, that kind of simple, say, paying attention to an object, cognizing an object and being aware of that, is like the hand. That's what goes to pick up a thing like a pen. So the sati is the mind being put onto an object and recognizing, here is a pen, here's the feeling of picking up a pen. So that's the first layer of mindfulness. So you can call that a mechanistic mindfulness, or a functional mindfulness. So the second layer is then what's called sati sampajanya, and you have to. I realize I'm talking to many Indian people here, so you can please forgive my poor Pali pronunciation. This is the anglicized pronunciation of Pali. But sati sampajanya is mindfulness and full awareness, or mindfulness and clear comprehension. It's the term that Ajahn Sumedho translates as intuitive awareness. And so sati sampajanya, sampa means complete or comprehensive, full. Anya is knowing, or knowledge. So the quality that sati sampajanya is referring to, Ajahn Chah would say that's like the arm. So that the hand is the thing that picks up the object. The arm is what enables the hand to get to where it needs to go to connect with the object. So sati sampajanya is being aware of an object, and also the context in which it's appearing, the time, the place, the situation. I can see, okay, on my little clock in the corner of my computer screen, it says it's 14:14, so we've been together for not quite a quarter of an hour. We've got an hour and a half to play with. Okay, the things are going on along at the kind of pace that's appropriate. That's a good thing. So that would be an aspect of a sati sampajanya, is that sense of paying attention. I'm recollecting what I've said already, what I'm thinking of saying in the near future, and also the fact that people are, most of you are looking directly at your screens and not kind of pushing buttons or going like that, saying, I can't hear you, your microphone's off, or unmute. So, and not seeing any of those signals of distress or non-hearing, then I would make the assumption, okay, everyone is being able to hear this okay. So sati sampajanya is a breadth of knowing, a breadth of awareness, and so it's taking in the time, the place, the situation, and the social context. So any kind of samasati, or right mindfulness, has an element of sila in it. There's a recognition of what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, what is harmful, what is destructive. And then with sati sampajanya, that is developed more completely, so that it's a recognition of what is honest, what's dishonest, what is kind, what is cruel, what is selfish, what is generous. That is part of the sampajanya element of it. It takes into it that aspect of sila and virtue. That's a very conscious element of it. So then the third layer, you can call that informed mindfulness, I would say. The third level is what I call holistic mindfulness, or a fully developed mindfulness, and that is satipanya, mindfulness conjoined with wisdom. And so that in the image that Ajahn Chah would use, that's like the body that the arm and the hand are connected to. Because without the body, the arm and the hand really have no life force. They're they're not connected to anything that's really alive and anything that can genuinely guide them to so what is or connect them with what is real and what is good and what is true, so that the satipanya is seeing things in a fundamental context, seeing things as they are, and so that's not just recognizing an object in its in the time, the place, the situation, the object in its context, but it's also recognizing that this is a mental event. Like right now, I can say I'm in my kuti at Amravati, and I'm looking at a computer screen, and I'm having a Dhamma talk with the Dhammarama community and the Aranya Vihara Trust, and I'm also noticing someone's got their microphone on, so someone other than me. So it's recognizing, yes, on one level, I'm in my kuti and I'm looking at all of you, but also it's recognizing that this is a mental event. There's seeing, hearing, thinking, remembering, choosing, all of that is going on. I close my eyes, you disappear. I open my eyes, you reappear. So this is built up of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, remembering, imagining. So, and that's the same for every single one of you. I'm not reading anybody's mind, but there is none of you that is not experiencing this through the agency of your mind, right? So satipanya, mindfulness and wisdom, is recognizing this is a mental event. This is known through the agency of the mind. And the Buddha said, he said, what is the world? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. That is the world in this Dhamma discipline. Actually, the full quotation, he says, that whereby one is a knower of the world and a conceiver of the world, that is called the world in this Dhamma and discipline. And what is it whereby one is a knower of the world? Lokamani, a Lokasanyi and Lokamani, a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world. So Lokasanyi is a perceiver of the world. Lokamani is a conceiver of the world. That is whereby one knows the world is the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. So the only world we can meaningfully know is the world of our own experience. So I feel that's an extremely significant principle, and it's really the basis of Vipassana meditation, is recognizing how the world as we experience it arises and passes away in an endlessly fluid procession of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, experiencing. And the Buddha says that is the world, that whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world. That is what we call the world in this Dhamma and discipline. So there's no meaningful, in that way of talking, is saying there isn't a meaningful way you can talk about loka, the world, outside the field of your experience. And so it's not a sort of theorized, conceptual, the universe without an observer. He doesn't talk in that way. He talks directly to our own individual experience and this life, this mind, and how it knows things. So, and I feel that's extremely helpful. So in terms of this quality of being aware of awareness, this is something that is a function of this area of satipanya. So as I said, in Ajahn Chah's image, this is the body that the arm and the hand are connected to. This is the root, the fundamental quality. So that the Dhamma itself is, say, that the source of satipanya, that is the basis, the root, just as the Dhamma, you can say, is the source of reality, that which upholds and is the integrative principle of reality. That is the Dhamma. That's the literal meaning of the word Dhamma or Dharma, is that which upholds, that which integrates. So that's the source of mindfulness and wisdom. So when we take a practice like Vipassana meditation, what's being appreciated in that is not just a relationship to the object and the object in its field, but it's also bringing into the picture the subject, the quality of knowing, as well as the object. And so Vipassana meditation is a way of helping the clarity of knowing be, brought to bear upon the field of experience, both on knowing the the changing patterns of the object, and also knowing the nature of the subject, that feeling of the knower, or the I, the individual, that sense of subjective reality. So that with sati and sati sampajanya, that doesn't really take the nature of the subject so much into the picture. This is just my way of reflecting about it or talking about it, but it's also I would say it's an intrinsic part of satipanya, mindfulness and wisdom, so that it's both the subject and the object are in the field of view. So when we practice vipassana meditation, what is being done is it's in a way clarifying that quality of knowing that can see the world arising and passing away. There is, and we might use phrases like, it's not I am hearing, but there is hearing. Not I am feeling, but there is feeling. Feeling arises and passes away. Not my leg hurts, but there is pain arising, and it's perceived as being my leg. But that feeling of minus, of ownership of that pain, that's also arising and passing away. So when we practice vipassana meditation, we use the reflections on anicca, dukkha, anatta, on change, unsatisfactoriness, and not self, as a way of clarifying that say relationship of subject and object, and say and being and embodying that quality of awareness that knows the changing patterns of feeling, both on the subject side and the object side, arising and passing away. Now, one of the things about in terms of this question, how do we practice being aware of awareness? One of the things that happens with vipassana meditation and other forms of meditation practice as well is that even though in that process that we can be using reflections like, oh, this is not my thoughts, but there is thinking. This is not my pain, but there is pain. This is not my sound, but there is hearing. Even though there's an investigation of those feelings of self, and the mind is noticing those subjective feelings of and letting go of them to some degree, it can still be establishing the kind of actuality of a watcher or a knower or a meditator. There's and we sometimes use that kind of language, being the silent witness, being the observer, being the watcher, being the one who knows. These kind of terms are often used in giving meditation guidance. And so I would say what happens with that in my own experience is that even though the aim is to use those as helpful tools for the practice, what they can do is they can create a subtle conceit. There's an I, a subtle sense of I the watcher, I the observer, I the meditator, I the experiencer, I the one who's letting go of self. It doesn't form as a clear sort of a word in the mind, and because of its subtlety, but it can still be there. I the witness, I the watcher, I the observer, and that can be an obstruction to this genuine quality of being aware of awareness, and similarly it's creating the unhelpful sort of say separation or alienation within the mind, in my experience. So to be aware of awareness in its purity, there needs to be a letting go of any kind of self-conceit, whether it's gross, like "ow, my leg hurts," or it's subtle, like the sense of there being a watcher or the one who knows, or the meditator, the experiencer. Even if that's not articulated, that all needs to be let go of in order for there to be a genuine and unobstructed awareness of awareness, and that quality to be completely free and boundless. Yeah, there's an interesting passage in one of the suttas in the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, Sutta number 140 in Middle Length Discourses, where the Buddha's talking about the mind conceiving, which is in Pali as manyati, like lokamani is a conceiver of the world, manyati is to conceive. And that doesn't mean just making an object. It's in the Pali, in the sense of the Pali, it literally means making the I feeling, the I attitude. And the Buddha says, conceiving is a poisoned arrow, it's a dart. Conceiving is a tumor, it's a disease, it's a burden. So that it speaks in these quite graphic ways of like any kind of I amness is stressful, is burdensome, is limiting. And so that the encouragement is to let go of any kind of that conceiving, any of that manyati, and to train the mind to let go of that. And that the I am is, in this respect, when that's taken as something solid and real, whether it's subtle or gross, that will create a limitation within the consciousness, within the mind. So it's interesting that in Thailand, in the forest tradition, so probably many of you are familiar with, some perhaps not, but in the Thai language, they frequently use the term puru to refer to this quality of awakened awareness. And that's often translated into English as the one who knows. And many of you have read Ajahn Chah's teachings, or like Deepti was saying, you heard me, Ajahn Chah, speaking with my accent in English, then you'll have heard him talking about the one who knows. And that can, in exactly this way, create a subtle kind of a personhood. It's there can be a kind of concretizing, a solidifying of that feeling of there is a person who knows, a little kind of homunculus in the brain that's doing the knowing. So in modern times, a few Dhamma teachers in this tradition, like Ajahn Jayasaro, and then previously Ajahn Buddhadasa, made the point of saying, really, it's better not to use the term puru, which means the pu in that comes from purusha, or puriso in Pali, purusha. It's better to use the word tatru, the phrase tatru, and for the Pali word dhatu, meaning element. So the dhatu, the element of knowing, rather than puru, the one who knows, or the being that knows. And I feel that's a very skillful distinction to make, because it's not creating even a subtle idea of an identity, an individual, a person, or an I that is doing the knowing. It's also in the Meghiya Sutta, which you'll find in the Udana, the Buddha's inspired utterances. He said to Meghiya, to be free of the conceit I am, that is nibbana here and now. So that's not a kind of a small statement, that when the heart is free of that I am, free of the asmimana, the conceit of I am, then that is nibbana here and now. So when the mind lets go of that conceiving quality, that I amness, then the result is nibbana, is peacefulness. So one of the practices that I wanted to share with you today, and it's really by coincidence that there is the picture of the great master Shu Yun on the wall behind me, that Deepti was referring to. So he is one of the greatest Buddhist masters of the current age. He was born in 1839, passed away in 1959. He determined to be a monk for 100 years, which he did. He was the teacher of Master Xuanhua of the City of 10,000 Buddhas. And a number of his teachings were translated into English, and they're in the series of books called Chan and Zen Training, or Chan and Zen Teaching, translated by Charles Luke. And when Ajahn Sumedho was a layman, when he was in the Peace Corps and working in Borneo, then a friend of his had sent him these Charles Luke translations of these with these teachings of Master Shu Yun in that. And so this was he was in that way he was Ajahn Sumedho's first meditation teacher, even though he had already passed away by that time. It was in about 1964-65 Ajahn Sumedho was studying this, and Master Shu Yun had passed away in 1959. But the Charles Luke translation is very accessible, very readable, and it was Dharma talks from a retreat that Master Shu Yun had led in Shanghai, I think at Dragonflower Monastery, when he was 114 years old. So any of you who are involved in teaching and want to retire when you're 100, you know, so don't even think about retirement yet, you know, if you want to follow Master Shu Yun's example. So anyway, the teaching that that is spelled out quite in detail in that series of talks is on what is called the Hua To. And again, I see there's a few Chinese people here on this talk, so please forgive my bad Chinese pronunciation as well, with my bad Indian pronunciations. The Hua To, and that is a form of reflective inquiry. It means the head and the tail. So this was a method that is very much part of the Chinese forest tradition and the Chan meditation tradition, and is also very much a part of the Advaita Vedanta tradition in India, and is used by, say, a great master, Sri Ramana Maharshi, in his teachings. So it's using the question, who am I, as an entry point for reflective inquiry. So, and this I have found, again, from having had instruction from Ajahn Sumedho on this many years ago, I found this is really helpful in clarifying those subtle forms of I am that take shape and can, in a way, dominate the mind unconsciously and form a framework for the meditation. And it's a way of turning the attention back onto those assumptions being made about the subject, and letting go of any kind of clinging or attachment or identification in the realm of the subject. So not just letting go of the realm of the object, but letting go of subtle attachments in the realm of the subject also. So probably some of you, or many of you, might be familiar with this as a practice. So essentially, and I see that the time is passing by, it's now 2:33 on my little clock, so I'm moving along, but I want to describe this practice for you while there's plenty of time available. So the mind is brought to a quality of stillness and focus as much as possible, so that the body is in meditation posture, and the mind is relaxed, is awake, is attentive, and as spacious as possible. And into that space of the mind, the question, who am I, is deliberately placed. So again, it's not just repeating the words, but it's there's an actual asking of the question. It's a real posing of the question. You're interested. There's a who am I, and then the reason why the practice in Chinese is called the Hua To, the head and the tail. The head is the question, the words of the question. The tail is the silence of the mind that comes after the question is posed. So the point of a question like this is you're not trying to come up with some sort of philosophical answer, and you're not coming up with your own name, like, you know, who am I? I'm Ajahn Amaro, full stop. Like, that's not the point of it. The point is that Ajahn Amaro is just a couple of words. What is the referent that those words are referring to? What is that? Who am I? So that the first part is dropping the question into the space of the mind, and then because the mind is quiet, is awake, you're in actuality you're tapping into that quality of mindfulness and wisdom, that intuitive wisdom of the chitta, and you're activating. There's a kind of accessing of that intuitive wisdom that knows, the name is not it, or that I am a man, or I am British, or I am American, I am Indian. That's not the whole story. So, and it's an intuitive understanding that a concept or a word or a name, that can't be the whole picture. So what happens is when you ask that kind of question, you drop that into the space of the mind, there's a pause, a hesitation, a gap before the self-creating and conceptual habits jump in. Now, the more intelligent you are and the quicker your mind is, then the smaller that gap appears to be. But really, small and large are completely relative concepts. So it might seem like a very tiny gap before, you know, the stream of words begins, but there is a gap, I would suggest. And that when that gap is paid attention to, then it appears it's revealed as being much larger than you thought it was at the beginning. So when you pose that kind of question, who am I? Then there's a pause, a gap, that hesitation. And then the conceptual forms and ideas and such like start arising. So the point of this practice is to keep the attention on that gap, because in that moment, the self-creating habit has been interrupted. The I-making and mind-making, the ahankara, mamankara, has been brought to an end. It's unplugged in that moment. So the mind is awake, there's awareness, and there is an awareness of awareness. You know that you're aware. The mind knows it's aware, and there isn't even the thought, I am aware. There's just the wordless, formless, aware quality. There's a knowing a knowing that you know. There is this very quality of being aware of awareness. So then the mind can think, oh, I'm aware of awareness. Or it can come and say, oh, this is the Dhamma, the aware of the present moment, or I am, or the Jitta is the Dhamma. That's right. The mind is not a person. The mind is Dhamma. This is the Dhamma aware of its own nature. I read about that in one of Ajahn Amaro's books. Right, I wrote that down somewhere. You know, the mind is lost in a string of thinking, even though it's philosophical thinking, or maybe even accurate thinking, but it's still thinking. In that moment, it has lost that quality of being kind of at the sort of at what you might call the back wall of experience. And that back wall, if that's not an inappropriate metaphor, the mind is at the back wall. When this is this is pure awareness, the mind has stepped away from the back wall and has been born into that pattern of thinking. So if the mind knows, oh, here is a thought saying, I am the awareness, or this is the Dhamma aware of itself. If the mind knows, oh, here is a thought that's arising and trying to give shape to that, then that it's still quite at the back wall. But as soon as it's brought into a thought and starts wanting to write that down, or say, oh yeah, I am the Dhamma, that's what I am, or like, yeah, this is the truth. Wow, this is great. I really understand it. You know, at that moment, the mind is born again into another concept and idea, into the world of language and memory. And the point of the practice is to embody that awakened aware quality. So in this practice, you might start off with a question like, who am I? And after a little while, the word who can seem really ridiculous. Like, well, this isn't a who, it's more of a what. So, and it's totally legal and appropriate. You change the wording, use your own language, whether it's English or Hindi or Chinese or Portuguese or French or whatever. Use your own language, use your own phraseology, and then you can develop that. Because if say, well, who is ridiculous? It's not a who. It's more like a what. You know, what am I? And then the word I can start to sound ridiculous as well. Like, well, rather than what am I, what is this, or what is it? And you can develop that and say turn into a more sort of progressively subtle and comprehensive practice. And so, because the point is not any kind of conceptual answer, it's not even the words of the question. The point is the silence of the mind that is awake and aware, and that awareness being unbounded, unlimited, or undistorted by any conceiving, any of that ahankara, mamankara, the I-making and mind-making. And so I feel this is a very helpful practice, also having its roots both in India and in China. And I don't think that Master Shu Yun had any Advaita Vedanta teachers, and I'm sure the Sri Ramana Maharshi and his companions over the centuries didn't have a lot to do with China. I feel it's maybe there have been geographical connections, but I feel it's more to do with looking at nature of mind and using the spiritual teachings to dig as deeply as possible into the nature of mind and to understand that which obstructs it, and through that understanding to liberate the heart from any kind of liberation, any kind of say limitations that I say come into being. So when there is that kind of, that quality of awakened awareness, and that the mind is sort of knowing that it knows. Then one way I talk about that is as a subjectless, objectless awareness, which is a bit of a clunky term, but because there isn't really a sense of an in here and an out there, that the mind is awake and aware, but there isn't a here and a there isn't a this and a that. There's the heart, the mind, awake to the reality of the present. So subjectless, objectless awareness is one way of talking about that. If that's useful, please take it and use it. If it's not useful, then leave it aside. But when we use a term like that, it can seem kind of formless and kind of spacey, you know, like, whoa, this doesn't, but how does that help me deal with my angry teenage children? Or how does that help me look after my ailing mother? Or what, you know, you don't live in the midst of Indian politics, Ajahn. You know, it's all right to talk about subjectless, objectless awareness, but you know, you should get a load of some of this. And so British politics have their own characteristic, and life at Amaravati has its own colorful challenges. So it can seem to be a very sort of spacey or remote or intangible quality. But I like to point out that really it's not just being the mind in a kind of dissociated or distracted, abstracted state. This is really, it's really in its purity, it's a very practical and incarnated attunement to the time, the place, the situation. So it's not just leaving that sampajanya aspect aside, but rather it's in a way fulfilling it in a complete way. So one of the difficulties of meditation and with vipassana, also samatha meditation, is that it's very easy for when we talk about things like non-attachment or you know, being the observer or the watcher or and such like, is that we make a duality, a dichotomy between, on the one hand, awareness or non-attachment, on the other, activity, my job, my family, my life, the world, you know, the kind of things I need to do in society. So we can make I would say, a false duality between activity on the one hand and awareness on the other. It's like, well, how can I be, you know, if I'm going to be aware, I have to shut down all activity. I have to go numb or switch off or dissociate from the world of things and seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And I say that's a false division, and it can lead to a lot of problems in your own mind, also in the family, in the world, and can disable us from really being effective. Many times, dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times over the years, I've been asked that kind of question: how do I practice non-attachment? I've got kids to bring up. I've got to look after my aged father who can't walk and can't talk anymore. How can I practice non-attachment with the people I love or the work that I do? So non-attachment doesn't mean not caring. It doesn't mean being abstracted or dissociated from the world of the senses. And so what I like to point out is that in the qualities of the Buddha, the classical description of the Buddha's nature, the Buddha's qualities, we have this a term, Vijja Charana Sampanno, that those of you who've done the chanting or are familiar with the Pali texts will recognize those words, Vijja Charana Sampanno. So Vijja is awareness, awakened awareness. Charana is conduct or activity. And Sampanno is comprehensive or consummate, someone who's completely completely master of that realm. So in our chanting book, we translate that as impeccable in conduct and understanding. And I feel that Vijja Charana, they represent the pair of qualities. Vijja is that awakened awareness, and Charana is conduct. So they work together. They're not separate realities, but these two hands are connected to the same body. They're both guided by the same life force. So that they are different in some ways, but they're also part of the same organic system in another. And that because of that, I like to use the term unentangled participating as a way of referring to this awakened aware quality. When we know that we know, when there is that pure awareness, and that the mind is consciously aware and it knows that it knows, then there is a participation. It's not a dissociated or distracted, abstracted kind of knowing, like a video camera, CCTV camera stuck up in the corner of your room. It's alive and it's engaged, and and so what I feel is that the mistake that we make is any kind of action or choice is seen as some sort of intrusion upon non-attachment. It's an intrusion upon awareness. It's a departure from awareness. Like, I've got to step out of awareness in order to do something. I've got to step out. I've got to sacrifice my non-attachment to go and look after my mum, or take the kids to school, or run my business. And I'd say that's a completely wrong understanding. Rather, if we take this principle of Vijja Charana Sampano, then the Vijja and the Charana they're united, they're unified. And so rather it's recognizing that our ability to act is part of the way things are. Non-attachment doesn't mean not acting. Non-attachment means acting in attunement with the time, the place, the situation, whatever is useful to the people that you're with and what the situation demands. And so it's there isn't a departure from that perfect attunement of the citta to Dhamma in acting and choosing and say looking after our work in the world, but rather our work in the world becomes an expression of that attunement to Dhamma. And the last thing I would say is the life of the Buddha is a perfect example of this. So with his Anuttara Sammasambodhi, the perfect and complete enlightenment, so his life was completely in tune with Dhamma from the moment of that enlightenment, the Sammasambodhi under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya. So the last place I saw many of you was in Bodh Gaya, and then in Delhi afterwards. A year ago, December of last year, I was with a number of you in Bodh Gaya, and that from that moment, the Buddha did not just go into a kind of abstracted state of detached knowing and just sit under the Bodhi tree and be a frozen witness. But he got up from the Bodhi seat. He followed the invitation of the Brahma that Anish recited at the beginning of this. He responded to the invitation of the Brahma and spent 45 years traveling around Northeast India barefoot, teaching and establishing the Sangha, the 84,000 Dhamma teachings, an incredibly comprehensive and proactive in his way of life. He was imaginative. He was confrontational. He was not afraid to get into debate with different scholars and yogis and Brahmins and the other members of his clan, the Kshatriya nobles of the Sakya kingdom, who didn't like him being a wanderer. They thought he should be looking after the kingdom. He was ready to engage. So that, I feel, is a perfect, a living example of Vijja Charana Sampano, that we can bring that quality of awakened awareness, that purified awareness, into our everyday life, into the choices that we make, the work that we do, and the way we relate to our families and to the world. So I offer these thoughts for consideration today.
Thank you, Ajahn. That's a deep dive into both what is Satipanya, and also you've also given us several tools to experience it for ourselves. So we'll open the floor for questions now. If anyone has questions related to what Ajahn just said, or anything else about your meditation practice, you could either raise your virtual hand on Zoom or type in the message to me and I would try and bring it up. We'll moderate the questions if we may or may not be able to take all that we have, but let's see. So for starters, Ajahn, we do have a question which says that according to me, Vipassana is insight which appears on its own, and there is no separate practice named as Vipassana meditation. What is your view about it?
Say that
I'd repeat that. Yeah. So the person feels that Vipassana is insight, which appears on its own. And there is no separate practice named as Vipassana meditation, so to say. So what is your view about it?
Well, there's certainly a practice that's called Vipassana or Vipassana, because a lot of people think they're following it. So whether it is actually producing Vipassana or not is another thing. But a lot of people around the world, tens of thousands, if not millions, are under the impression that they practice Vipassana meditation. So I'd say there's two things going on. There is Vipassana, the method, and Vipassana, the change of heart. So that it's the same word is used to refer to two different things. And so the Vipassana, which is the method, is we say that quietening the mind to a point of focus, and then applying those reflections on anicca, dukkha, anatta. So that's Vipassana, the method. And I say that whether or not you say that's not genuine Vipassana, it's like, yeah, that isn't insight. That's in a way the words on the outside of the tin. That's describing what you do. It's rather like a recipe for cooking a meal. Yeah, that's the recipe, and you put the ingredients together and you follow the recipe. That's you're following the method, but the actual Vipassana is eating the food and being nourished by it. The actual insight is the change of heart. So the word is used to refer both to the method and to the change of heart. So there's I think that's often a confusion. So that and it can be that people feel that, oh, I'm practicing the method, therefore I am experiencing Vipassana, or I'm doing Vipassana. It's like, yeah, you're following the recipe, you're cooking the food, but are you actually eating any of it? Are you being nourished by it? And that's a different story. So that I think, I'm not sure exactly where the question's coming from, but I would say that it's important to recognize that just following the method isn't the same as having insight. But the insight itself is when the attitude genuinely changes, when there's the way I talk about it is a change of heart. And I think the Aranya Vihara Trust, you did your own edition of, I just happen to have a copy here, The Breakthrough. And there is actually a chapter in here that's called, if I remember correctly, Vipassana as a method and as a change of heart. I haven't got my glasses on, but anyway, you will find that I have talked about it in print in this book, and that if you want to look into it further or follow that up, you can find word on it. But anyway, I hope that responds to the question in an effective way.
Yes, certainly, Ajahn. It definitely clarified that it's both insight as well as the practice around it, where the word is used in both places, in both senses. Also, we'll put up the link for the book so that the questioner can reference that. The next question is, what is the difference between awareness and mindfulness? And without awareness, can we be mindful?
Well, I talked about that a little bit. The word mindfulness is used in a very broad way. So it can refer to anything from that kind of functional sati of just, and even miccha sati, the kind of like the mindfulness of someone who's scamming their bank. You can mindfully falsify documents and steal money from your bank, or you can, one of the questions in the Buddhist meditation world is, how can the military use mindfulness to train their soldiers? And can you have a mindful sniper? It's like, well, yeah, you can, but it's miccha sati, or kind of wrong mindfulness, or a kind of mindfulness that's disconnected from from Dhamma, and a distortion of mindfulness or a travesty of mindfulness. So the word mindfulness can be used even for that, all the way through to satipanya, mindfulness and full awareness. So the word is used in a very, very broad way. So when I use the word awareness, then usually I'd say something like awakened awareness and qualify it like that. And that is used. I'm using that to refer to the quality of vijja or anya, that sort of those liberating qualities. That the Buddha uses language in a very liberal way, and so that, like in the Dhammacakka Sutta, his first discourse, when he's talking about the arising of wisdom or the insight that arose after his enlightenment, it was chakung udapadi, chaku, the eye, vision arose, chakung udapadi, jnanam udapadi, panya udapadi, vicca udapadi, aloko udapadi. So knowledge arose, understanding arose, light arose, wisdom arose. He's using a whole string of different terms to refer to the same area. So when I use the word awareness or awakened awareness, it's generally referring to that sort of transcendent quality of vijja, that awareness that is, say, not confined to the five khandhas, but it's that which is the transcendent wisdom that is, say, can know the field of experience, but is not limited by the patterns of conditioning. There was a second part to the question. Can you repeat that for me?
Yes, Ajahn. One moment. Yeah, the question was, without awareness, can we be mindful?
Well, again, we can be mindful to a small degree, and that's, in a way, I don't want to put that down, because that's where we begin, because we start off being anxious, distracted, and caught up in our activities, in our moods, by the things going on around us. So just having the intention, I need to be more mindful. I want to be more mindful. Just having the intention, and at least a few minutes of the day, bringing attention to what you're doing, that's a beginning point. And so that the more that functional mindfulness can be developed, then the more it can lead to the mindfulness and full awareness of sati sampajanya, and that then leads to mindfulness and wisdom. I think that mindfulness and wisdom really needs to be developed by an active meditation practice, but just developing sati and sati sampajanya, that can be done just by like making a commitment, putting forth the effort during the day to notice your speech patterns, to particularly using mindfulness of the body, noticing how you're sitting, how you're standing, how you're walking, what the body is doing. That's a very helpful way of establishing a mindfulness practice. And then the more, it's cumulative. It's like learning a language or any other kind of skill. You're learning to program a computer or learning a new job. When you join a new firm, then it takes a while to pick up the skills. So it's exactly the same with mindfulness. And the more that you use it, then it's just like with language, you develop facility, you can put sentences together, you recognize what's a good phrase, what's a bad phrase, what's the correct way of putting it, what's an incorrect way. And that refinement takes shape over time with application. So it's but the more that mindfulness is committed to and is established, then the more it can lead to the development of ongoing and full awareness.
Thank you for that. So Ajahn, we were talking about Vipassana and also the intuitive, rising of the intuitive understanding. The question is that how does this intuitive understanding become a felt reality?
Keep applying it. It's like in a way, when those moments arise, so that then, say, you can also use it not just in terms of this way of investigating the I, me, and mine feeling, but you can also use it to inform your decision making, or working with difficult situations, or in your life. So So you might have an issue that you have in your workplace or in the family. What am I going to do about, what am I going to do about Ravi? Excuse me if there's any Ravis out there, but I'm just using a random Indian name. So what am I going to do about Ravi? And so rather than getting lost in anxious, chattering thought, you sit down, close your eyes, let the mind go as quiet as possible, and then without any other kind of elaboration, just drop that question into the space of your chitta, your heart. What am I going to do about Ravi? And then in exactly the same way that you're accessing that intuitive wisdom, and then it might arise the thought, why is it up to you to do something? Oh, right. I'm always taking responsibility for things that have got nothing to do with me. He's just a guy that works with me. I've only known him for 2 weeks. Why is it suddenly my responsibility to fix this guy? Oh, look at that. So I'm just making that up as a random example. And so it's in that moment, there's a recognition of, okay, you've dropped the question into the space of the heart, the mind, and then there's a listening, there's a pause, and then something arises, like that kind of a response. And then the way that you bring that as a sort of a living presence in your life is that then at the end of that, you realize, well, that was really helpful, or like something that, yeah, that's right, that's a good fit. And that kind of intuitive knowing, it's like when you buy a pair of shoes and you know, these are a really good fit. They fitted before you had that thought, these are a really good fit. That fittingness of the shoes is a non-conceptual experience, right? There's a direct knowing, this is a good fit. So in exactly the same way, when you an insight like that with respect to that question about this imaginary guy Ravi, it's the mind recognizes, oh, that's right. It knows that fittedness, if such a word can be used. It knows that it's an intuitive knowing. It's not conceptual. So in that there's a recognition. Oh, that's really that's valid. That's really useful. Right. Notice that. So it's like a kind of positive. Speaking about psychology, it's a positive reinforcement. When that was done, this was a good result. Like the pigeon got the piece of fruit in the in the cage, and like the monkey got the piece of banana. It's like the behavior was reinforced, and it's like that. It's a kind of a reinforcement process. Notice this. Look, that's really useful. You got the piece of fruit. You got the reward. Look at that. Let that in. And I'm not trying to demean that or trivialize it, but it is that, because oftentimes the doubting mind can say, yeah, but well, there's and then gets lost in conceptual proliferation around it. But the more that we say that action was taken, there was a beneficial result. Right. Notice that. Let that be something that's taken to heart. So I give this kind of instruction all the time, because it's so easy to gloss over those beneficial results, because the mind gets lost in doubting and gets distracted by other things. It's like in the meditation, when you've got caught up with a sound or a pain in your leg, and then you recognize that and you've let it go. It's like, oh, in that moment, the mind is awake and aware, and the grasping has stopped. How does it feel? What's it like when the grasping stops? Notice that, feel that, let that into your bones. And I those of you who've done retreats with me will have heard me say that kind of thing over and over and over. So notice it, because that noticing is what we learn from. That it's a non-conceptual direct knowing. So that's why the word intuitive is quite good to refer to that. Has a non-conceptual, non-theoretical quality. So if you want to make that intuitive wisdom a part of your lived experience, keep doing it. Keep noticing the beneficial results of working in that way. And also the opposite, how unbeneficial it is if you just get lost in endless, turbulent conceptual proliferation and doubting, how that doesn't help. You can't worry your way to the end of a problem, in my experience. There's an infinite supply of of worry that we can create. Just if you know what I mean.
Yes, Ajahn, we recall how you shared with us your 3 years of working on worry and anxiety. And that's a very oft used example that we keep reminding ourselves about, how to deal with what arises in our experience. So Ajahn, the next question is that whenever we talk of awareness outside of the khandas, most Vipassana meditators object, meaning possibly people who've been, coming from that tradition. They say that this is not the teaching of the Buddha. It is Advait. So in Buddha's teaching, only Nibbana is unconditioned, the asankhat. Is awakened awareness Nibbana?
Well, if there wasn't, how would Nibbana be known if there wasn't some kind of awareness that was outside the 5 khandhas? I mean, Nibbana is an experience. What is knowing Nibbana? Right? So how did the Buddha know peacefulness? How did the Buddha know peace? There has to be some quality of awareness that is outside the 5 khandhas. Otherwise, it would mean that enlightenment would be synonymous with death of the body. In my logic, my understanding of how it works, I'm not quite sure where that every kind of knowing is part of the 5 khandhas. I think it's an Abhidhamma teaching, but it just doesn't make sense. And over and over again, thousands of times in the teachings, then when the description of someone being enlightened, when they realize arahatship, is then and then they knew that which was to be done has been done. There is no more of this to come. And their hearts were liberated. So there is a knowing of that liberated state. The citta knows that liberated state. So that anyway, to me, that the way it only makes sense if there is the teaching, this Dhamma teaching may only make sense if there is some quality of awareness which is transcendent of the 5 khandhas. And so, and again, my teachers haven't come from such a theoretical background, but much more of a experiential one. And so that, I mean, to say only Nibbana is outside the 5 khandhas, I would be interested to know, what would they say? Well, what is it that knows Nibbana? Yeah. And because of that, to me, I use the word vicca to refer to that, or lokuttara panya, transcendent wisdom. Anya is also used in that same kind of a way. And so that I don't feel it's too helpful to get involved in philosophical or philological arguments, or if you are, to be aware of the argument-making mind, but rather what's most useful is to know that quality for yourself, to see how it works in your own citta, and with Vipassana meditation to see if that quality of awakened awareness that knows the world but is not limited by the world. So like the word lokavidu, again in the qualities of the Buddha, the knower of the worlds. The lokavidu is the Buddha knows the world, but is not limited by the world, is not attached to the world or identified. So that word Buddha is also a way of referring to that awakened awareness, and it's not an accident that that's the word that the Buddha used to refer to himself, and that when and so when he had that dialogue with the Brahmin Dona, there's a famous passage in the suttas where this Brahmin is going along a dusty lane, and he sees these footprints in the dust, and he thinks, wow, who made these footprints? There's all these extraordinary patterns made in the dust. What kind of a being was it that has these feet with these extraordinary marks and wheels and images and the lines on their feet? So he follows the footsteps off the path and goes into the forest and finds the Buddha sitting under a tree, and is kind of amazed and awed by the presence of this being. And so he kneels down in front of him, and the Buddha opens his eyes, and then Dona says, excuse me, but are you a deva? And the Buddha says, no, I'm not. He said, are you a Brahma? He said, no, I'm not. Are you a yaka? He said, no, I'm not. Are you a human being? Are you a manusa? He said, no, I'm not. So when the Buddha is asked, are you a manusa? He says no, and he can't lie. So then he says, so then, well, excuse me, sir, what, can you tell me what you are? And he says, remember me one who as one who is awake. Remember me as one who is awake. And so I feel that's a really significant, buddhosmi, like in buddho asmi. And so you can look that up in the suttas. I feel it's probably the place where the term Buddha was sort of most clearly characterized in the teachings, and possibly why it became customary to refer to him as the Buddha is on the basis of that dialogue and similar dialogues. And I feel it's very, very significant. So here you have a totally enlightened being. He can't lie, and he's asked, are you a human being? And he says no. Yeah, that whereby you could define me as a human being, that has been abandoned, let go of, cut off like a palm tree stump and rendered incapable of arising in the future. But he's sitting right there with a human body and having a conversation, and born from King Suddhodana and Queen Mahamaya as his physical parents. So in that moment, the where he's speaking from is the Buddho, that awakened awareness. Is that that's the, in a way, that's the quality that is speaking, that it's coming from that place. And again, those of you who are familiar with the Ajahn Chah's, a little book of Ajahn Chah's teachings called No Ajahn Chah, and it describes the title of the book comes from this dialogue, a kind of similar dialogue, and someone comes up to Ajahn Chah and says, "Who is Ajahn Chah?" And he says, "There is no Ajahn Chah." Yeah. And they ask in a different dialogue, "How old are you? And do you live here all the time?" He says, "I have no age. I don't live anywhere. If you have an age, if you live somewhere, then you're somebody. If you're somebody, then that's a cause of suffering. So don't be anything." And so that again, Ajahn Chah, he's known as an enlightened being. He cannot lie, and he says there is no Ajahn Chah, sitting there, having a dialogue with another person who's come to his monastery, and he eats and sleeps and breathes, and yet he can say without any deception whatsoever, there is no Ajahn Chah. That's not a solid absolute reality. So I feel that when we see that that quality of Buddho, the awake, aware quality, is embodied in the Buddha's life, it's a very good characterization of that combination of vijja and charana. And so that I would say that vijja is totally transcendent, but the charana is absolutely part of this physical felt world, and that they're not separate from each other. And so I'm not sure that perception of any kind of knowing has to be within the five khandhas. I believe it's some aspect of the Abhidhamma teachings, but to me it doesn't make sense. And if we look at the life of the Buddha as a prime example, here you have totally liberated, awakened awareness, not only unlimited by the five khandhas and unattached to, and refusing to be identified by the five khandhas, but also acting very, very creatively, imaginatively, and effectively in the world. His teaching is the longest lasting spiritual, the Sangha that he founded is the longest lasting human institution on the planet, as far as I know. Maybe the Jain order, actually, excuse me, probably the Jain monastic order is of a similar age, but he is a very effective on a practical level. So it's also, there's another teaching that refers to this, and when that question about an awareness outside the five khandhas is raised. So in the Agi Vachagota Sutta, Sutta number 72 in the middle length discourses, the Buddha's having a dialogue with this wanderer Vachagota. And Vachagota has been trying to ask the Buddha, what happens to an enlightened being when they pass away? And the Buddha used this very famous example of saying, well, look, Vacha, if we had a little fire burning here made of grass and sticks, and the fire went out, and I asked you, where did the fire go? North, south, east, or west? What would you say? And then Vajragota says, well, I'd say it's the wrong question. The question doesn't apply. It didn't go north, south, east, or west. It just went out. And the Buddha said, exactly, because you are asking a question that presumes a reality that doesn't exist. Where doesn't apply, reappears in another realm, and where an enlightened being goes when they pass away. It says, reappears doesn't apply, does not reappear, does not apply. Both reappears and does not reappear, that doesn't apply. And neither reappears nor does not reappear, that doesn't apply either. You're asking the question in the wrong way. So then he goes on to make this very, very significant comment, which I quote very regularly in my Dhamma talks. So he says, that material form, Vacha, whereby someone trying to define the Tathagata would define him, that has been cut off at the root, made like a palm tree stump, deprived of the conditions for existence, and rendered incapable of arising in the future. The Tathagata is liberated from being reckoned in terms of form, material form. Vacha, he is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So too with Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, and Vijnana. So the Tathagata is liberated from being reckoned in terms of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. He is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So right there in this dialogue, you have the Buddha saying, you can't define this quality in terms of the five khandhas. That connection with the five khandhas is cut off at the root, made like a palm tree stump, deprived of the conditions for existence, and rendered incapable of arising in the future. The bridge is down. The boat is not sailing. It cannot dock. There is no connection. But he's sitting there having a dialogue, person to person, with Vajragota. So right there, you have an embodiment of that quality of totally awakened awareness, the Tathagata, the Buddho, in the middle of a living dialogue with a human being, and saying, you can't define this quality in terms of the five khandhas. Right there, it's right. It's not hidden away, So to me, I don't know how somebody who says that all qualities of awareness have to be outside the five khandhas or are within the five khandhas. I don't know how they explain a teaching like that, because it's kind of right there in the middle of the Majjhima Nikaya. It's not kind of hidden away in a commentary. It's front center. So in that, I feel one of the most important and beautiful things is where he says, the Tathagata, he is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So there's a quality that's there, and he uses this imagery of the sea, the great ocean, like it's present, and like the sea, it's powerful, but you can't tell what's going on beneath the surface. It reaches to the horizon and goes beyond our vision. So profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So he's talking about that quality of that awareness, or that knowing, or that reality of Dhamma, I would say. It's profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. It's there, it's present. There's a suchness, but you can't really define that in terms of the five khandhas. So I'm sure the philosophers and pedants and academicians would say, well, that's a totally flawed argument. You can't really say that. But I think to take it as a reflective teaching, that profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, when the mind is awake and aware, and there really has been a letting go, where there is this pure awareness, aware of itself, or I would say also the Dhamma aware of its own nature in that respect, then profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, there's a suchness, but you can't really add anything more to it than that. You get those adjectives, profound, immeasurable, unfathomable. It's not a lot to hang on to, but it evokes a quality. So like those of you who've stood by the seashore, and you're standing on a cliff or on a beach, and you look out over the sea, something in the heart goes, wow. There's a wonderment, right? Again, I'm not reading anybody's minds, but there's a wonderment. Wow. So the Buddha uses exactly that wonderment and that sense of presence and power and limitlessness as a way, at least using some kind of an imagery to refer to that inequality. So that sutta is one of the few areas where the Buddha is, in a sense, talking about his own subjective experience, how he knows his own mind and his own being. And so that I feel it's a very significant teaching. So I would encourage whoever asked that question to take that teaching and the dialogue with Dona to take that and reflect on that. And if you're interested, there's a new edition of The Island that we just printed here in England, and I on account of this exact theme, I included a more full quotation from Dona, included some of the Pali in the quotation to help sort of fill out that point. So this is now on our website. There's a new edition of The Island, and if you want to look it up and see some of the Pali, it's on page 166, 167. So when Dona asks, "Sir, are you a human being?" the Pali for what the Buddha says is "Nako ahang brahmana manuso bhavisamiti." That which I would be known as a person does not exist. Brahmana. So that's on page 167 of the new edition of The Island. It's the beginning of chapter 10, the unapprehendability of the enlightened. Again, I'm not trying to just promote my own books, but these are common themes, so it happens to be referred to there.
Yes, thank you, Ajahn. And your books are really a favorite amongst us. So I'll just go to the next question, probably the last one. Who am I means to observe the mind and make it converted from unwholesome to wholesome state. The person is trying to validate if that's the correct understanding. I'd repeat that.
Yeah,
Who am
please.
I means to observe the mind and make it converted from unwholesome to wholesome state.
Well, if it's used in the right way, just repeating "Who am I" as a mantra won't dispel all unwholesomeness. It's if that inquiry is applied in the way I was describing, so the mind is brought to a quality of quietness, and that question is deliberately asked, so posed and brought into the mind, and challenges those I-making and mind-making habits and makes them fall away, then I would say that is supremely wholesome. That letting go of conceit, of the I am, seeing through that, seeing the empty nature of the I am, and all our usual I ams, that's extraordinarily wholesome. And but it's not, again, it's don't mistake the practice for the result of the practice. Like Vipassana, the practice in Vipassana, the change of heart, that who am I as a practice is not the same as that. The hua is not the same as the toe. The head is not the same as the tail. The question, who am I, is the head. The really important part is the tail, I would say, if I'm understanding the wording correctly. The really important part is the silence of the mind after that I-ness has been punctured. So that if that puncturing of the I am, the I-making and mind-making, that's like a bubble that's burst, has been popped. Then that open, spacious, awake quality, that is supremely wholesome. And if that is established, and then life is sort of lived from that place, and we act and speak from that place, that's supremely wholesome and beneficial. And I would say, in essence, that's where Ajahn Chah was speaking when he said, "There is no Ajahn Chah," or the Buddha says, that whereby I could be known as a manusa, that doesn't exist, Brahmana. That is from that kind of clarity. And so it's knowing that our name, our job, our role in life, and all those things, these are convenient fictions, that they can't be absolute realities. And so it makes the mind relate to opinions, to emotions, to relationships, to our work, our decision making. It makes all of that far more naturally in tune with Dhamma, and more skillful and more honest, more straightforward, and more sort of practically effective. Because at that moment, I would say there's nothing obscuring the heart's attunement to the reality of the way things are, so that we can be surprised by the things that we say, or we find ourselves having more energy than we realized, or we find ourselves able to put things down when we sense, okay, actually I'm really exhausted, I need to stop and take a break. And it's the simple way of talking about it is it helps us to live more intuitively and more responsively, not being responsible as a ethical consideration, but responsively, if you understand that word, so that there's a responding to what the moment needs. And then that is I would say the way that so who am I questioning is supporting that which is wholesome and beneficial. Okay?
Yes, thank you, Ajahn. I'll invite Anishi for formal Anumodana.
Andamayam Dhamma Kathaya Sadhukaram Dadamase. Sadhu, 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 Anumodami.
We are very, very grateful for your time and the teaching today, Ajahn. And may you teach for 100 years and more is the wish. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining today.
Yes, well, thank you, Deepti, for helping to coordinate things and to be a point person for this, and for all of the people with the Dhammarama Center in Delhi. I wish you all well. It's very nice to see so many of you, and I'm happy to have had this opportunity. And so may you all be well. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn.
I will
Thank
depart now.
you.